Hello, and welcome to Masters of Moment, brought to you by Freshworks. I'm Alan Bergson. Thanks for joining us and taking time to explore topics to help you improve customer experience and more easily delight your customers. Too often today, it feels like everyone is talking and no one is listening. When it comes to your customers, they want to be heard. And if they're not heard, they're usually not delighted. Today, I'm really excited to explore how to cultivate active listening abilities with our guest, Matt Abrahams. Matt is a passionate, collaborative, and innovative educator and coach. He teaches effective virtual communication and essentials of strategic communication at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, Alan. I'm really excited to be here and to listen and talk about listening.
Well, why don't you start by giving people a little bit of a perspective? I'm a big fan of context. Mm-hmm. And so just so people understand where you're coming from, this is you teach people how to present, but at the same time, a key element of that is listening. So maybe just give an idea of what's the Think Fast, Talk Smart. What is that all about?
Think Fast, Talk Smart is really a name that I came up with for what people can do to focus on spontaneous speaking. That's the kind of communication that happens in the moment. You know, a lot of us think about our communication as something we plan for. We create slides, we practice, we record, and all of that is very, very important. But when you think about it, Alan, most of our communication is spontaneous. It's what happens back in the day when we used to walk down the hall with people. It's when you're in a meeting and somebody asks for your opinion or somebody asks you a question. These are all spontaneous acts, and we need to be able to respond in a confident, concise, and compelling way. And that's what Think Fast, Talk Smart is really all about. It's a methodology for helping people to articulate their points of view in a way that reflects what they want, but also gives the audience what they need.
I feel like I need that right now. And that's we were talking about that a little bit in the green room before we started about that. What are the skills like? Just for perspective, our audience, these are customer experience professionals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think that you just talked about is being prepared. I think you had mentioned this earlier. What's your plan when you answer the phone? Mm-hmm. And this is a common thing. We've all been on a call where you talk to the customer service rep, or you talk to a sales rep, or you talk to somebody's service provider, and you're just sitting there shaking your head. They're not listening to me.
Right.
Everything I just said, they have no idea what I'm talking about, or they have a preconceived notion of what it is that I'm trying to say. They're looking on their checklist of things that can go wrong, and they found it, and they're done. I mean, so
absolutely
put us in their shoes.
So many of us, well, one of two things: either we don't plan, or we get so locked into our plan that we don't actually experience in the moment. And so what really I'm all about when I teach my strategic communication classes and other work I do at Stanford, it's really about how do you prepare yourself in a way so that you can then be spontaneous and respond to what's needed in the moment. I like to use the analogy of sports. Most people listening in have played a sport. When you learn a sport, when you practice a sport, you're practicing certain techniques and skills so that in the moment, when they're needed, you can deploy them. So it is the preparation that allows you to be spontaneous. And that sounds strange when you apply it to communication, but in many aspects of our life, like music, like sports, it's what we do all the time. So it's really about thinking about the foundational skills. And, you know, prior to becoming an academic, I worked in service organizations where I ran tech support, I ran education and training, and I know how critical these skills are for the people who are listening in. And it's all about giving yourself time to think through and practice some of these skills so in the moment you can do what's needed. And fundamentally, it all boils down to listening and understanding the other person's perspective. Empathy is critical, and listening is the number one step to empathy.
So you make it sound so easy.
It's not.
And so I'm about to pick up the phone. I'm about to answer a call. What is your advice for me? What's in my head right now? Because I'm an expert in the coffee mugs that we sell, right? And so somebody's going to call me up, and I'm going to say, they want, I already in my head, I'm thinking they either want to return it, it's broken, they spelled something wrong, whatever it is, right? I've already got all the answers, right? But that's probably not the right that my perspective to address that call. So take us through it.
Yeah. So what that is it's called stockpiling, where in your mind you already have all these itemized options for what this interaction is going to be like. And I'd rather suggest a different type of approach. First, people are the approach you just took there, Alan, is one where I have a problem that I need to solve. I have to identify the problem. I have to solve it right away. And that's not a bad mindset. But when you're initially starting, perhaps taking the mindset of, I'm excited to engage with a customer, and I have an opportunity here to show the value of our company, to show how I can be responsive and I'm good at what I do. So thinking about it as an opportunity, one where you are going to interact and collaborate with the person on the other end, rather than I'm just a service provider who has to give whatever they need. Start from saying, this is an interaction that can be very special. You know, I used to run training departments for software companies, and we were the first place where the people who actually used the software met the company. And so our job was not just to teach them skills, our job was to give them a good experience with our company. So the attitude that you approach is the number one place. Now, having that knowledge you talked about, knowing what to do if the cup is chipped or leaks or has a misspelling, knowing that is important, and you have that in your back pocket. But at first, when I answer that phone, I'm all about connecting with the person, trying to understand where they're at. That might mean they're frustrated, that might mean they're lost, but I'm there for them. I'm going to reflect what I hear, and then I'm going to offer to help. And that's how you start these interactions.
So let's dig into that a little bit, because I've been on calls where somebody says, I'm so happy to help you today. How was your day? But that never really feels good. What can I do to help the person on the other and understand, or that I'm listening, or that I'm practicing what you're just saying? What is there, not necessarily catchphrases. I don't think that's really the right way to do it, but a strategy.
So I think first and foremost, you start with an open question to show people that you're ready to listen. So how can I help you today? What is behind this call you're making? So you start with an open question, and as people are speaking, you're listening, and we're listening in a way that's different than the way we most often listen. Many of us listen just enough to get an idea of what somebody is saying, and then we immediately jump into formulating plans, responses, and evaluating and judging.
You can see that in people when you're talking to them. You can see them,
their
like
eyes sort of glaze over.
They stop listening, and now they already have a response.
That's exactly right. And you have to listen differently. So I like to encourage people in these situations to listen to paraphrase. In other words, I'm listening to figure out what is the crux, the bottom line of your issue, your concern, your idea that you're sharing. And I'm listening intently to do that. And as I'm listening in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what is the bottom line here. Now, you don't always have to get it right. You just have to try to find what that bottom line is. And when the person is done speaking, you share that back, not in the way that a 5-year-old does, where you parrot back everything somebody says, but you highlight the key issue as you see it. The ultimate goal early in one of these types of interaction is our F word. And Alan, it's not that naughty F word. It's fidelity, it's accuracy and clarity of what's being spoken. And so when somebody brings to me a problem or a concern, I'm trying to make sure I accurately understand the issue. Doesn't mean I agree with it, doesn't mean I know how to solve it. I'm just trying to figure out what it is. And when I listen to paraphrase, that is, I'm saying to myself, what's the bottom line here? And then when the person's done, I share with them what that bottom line is. I say, so what I'm hearing you ask about, or the issue as I see it is this. I'm doing that to validate that I got it right, so that we're at least talking about the same thing, because from there we can begin to collaborate to solve the problem.
That's the understanding that you're talking about the same thing, I think, is maybe the crux of the challenge. I was in the IT support business for many years, and we had this concept that all of our users are liars. And
that seems strange.
But the context is they don't know how to explain what the problem is. So when they call you and tell you whatever it is going on, that's probably not it, or you have to dig deeper to understand. And so what you're talking about is finding that, hey, do we agree that this is what's going on? That's a big deal. I mean, so how do you dig deeper like that? Because like I said, very often, if you're dealing with technology, if you're dealing with a complex situation, the person who's calling you is just saying, I can't, this is what's going on. I mean, I have this with my mother. She calls me up and says, I can't do this on my phone. I'm like, well, you got to be more specific, right?
Right.
So how do you dig deeper?
Well, so a couple things first. Rather than thinking of your clients and customers as liars, I would suggest you think of yourself as a tour guide. And as a tour guide, your job is to lead people through an experience that's positive to an end destination. And if I am a tour guide and somebody comes to me, essentially they're lost, right? They can't do something they want to do, or the product or tool or service that they're trying to work with isn't getting them where they want to be. My job is to get them back on course and to get them to their destination. Framing it that way almost answers your question for you. That the analogy helps. So I need to understand where they've been, right? So if you're lost, where are you coming from? Where have you been? So I'm going to ask some questions about what have you done? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? And I'm framing that to understand, and maybe I'll ask some very detailed questions, maybe more generic questions, but I'm really trying to figure out where the person is located so I can move them towards the direction that they want to go. That's really what I'm trying to do. And so think of yourself as a tour guide towards the destination, the shared destination that you have with the person you're speaking to. And everything you would do as a tour guide is exactly what you should do with the person on the phone or online.
I think the analogy holds a little. Look, as a tour guide, you know the terrain, you know the geography, you know the area, and but you may not know the destination in particular. It also may be a new destination that you haven't seen before because new problems crop up. Yeah. So in the end, it's how do you sum it up with that customer? How do you show them that, you know, how do you know when you've gotten to that negotiated agreement? Hey, I hear you, Matt, and this is what I'm hearing is you do. This is what you're going through. So my suggestion is we do this. Something like that, right?
Absolutely. So you lay out the course. You say, okay, now that we have agreement, or I have an understanding of the situation you're in, thank you. I think gratitude is incredibly important in this, especially if somebody is frustrated. Expressing thank you for taking the time to help me understand what your issue is and where you are. Here is my suggestion for the path we take, or the potential path we take. You should know I've been down this path before with many people, or if it's something you've never seen, you could say, this is new to me. But I have a lot of resources, and together we're going to figure out how to do this. So you're setting expectations the whole way. You know, a good tour guide sets expectations all along the way. I actually was a tour guide once. When I was in college, I was a tour guide. It was the highest paying job I could get. I was desperate for money. To this day, I can still walk backwards in a straight line and talk. They taught us, they said, above all else, as a good tour guide, never lose your tour group. And the same thing is true with you as a service rep. Your job is to never lose the person you're talking to. Take them through the process. And how do you do that? You set expectations, you preview where you're going, you share what you know and don't know about the experience. And that way, somebody will feel protected, safe, and trusting because you're there with them. You're not just walking them through a script, and you're not just throwing resources at them. You're actually taking care of them.
One question I have from that perspective is, I'm the manager of the service rep, and that sounds like a lot of vagary and high and stuff that's difficult to measure. I'm thinking about call response time and average close time and NPS. What am I looking for as I'm reviewing these calls, or maybe I'm sitting and listening in? How do I get a sense that this person knows what they're, or is following what you're prescribing here, following that type of a tour guide mentality?
So I totally understand the question. I was one of those managers who was looking at those things at one point. But I'd like to suggest that actually going through a process like this can be more effective and efficient than the way we typically do it. Not necessarily up front, but if you look at the interaction as a whole, the time you invest up front understanding the issue, connecting with the person, pays dividends in the end, because you can do it, you can accomplish things more quickly. You can actually close cases faster and not have repeat calls because of the thoroughness you dedicated up front. So if I'm a manager, a few of the metrics I'm looking at are satisfaction. Was the person satisfied with the interaction? Did the person feel valued and listened to? Would the person recommend that particular rep in the future based on what they did? I would look beyond. So not just that call, but does this particular person calling in call again frequently afterwards because the problem wasn't truly resolved, or was it truly shut down and I didn't have to hear from that person again? So there are different metrics that I would look at. It's not all about how quickly I can close something. It's really about the relationship that's formed. In this world where referrals and references are critical, if somebody has a positive experience, that is worth its weight in gold. So we need to look at the metrics a little differently, but certainly we do need to be measuring these things for sure.
So when I'm onboarding a new customer service rep and I'm trying to teach them how to do their job, and maybe they've never done customer support before, maybe they've done it for different products. And the normal way is you give people some templates, you give them product knowledge information. What do I need to, what are the top things that I would want to teach them or make sure they understand before they answer that first call?
So a few things. I'm a huge fan of actually role playing and doing. I don't know about you, Alan, but in my mind, I'm amazingly eloquent. But when I open up my mouth, I'm not always as lucky. So practice is important. Watching other people is important. Reminding yourself of what your actual goal in the interaction is. It's not just to close the case. It's to have a positive interaction where the person you're speaking with learns and leaves feeling connected to you and the company, and where you learn yourself. So it's really about how do you prepare yourself? So it's about drilling and practicing, observing others and seeing what works, and most importantly, coming up with a plan for review and reflection after the fact. In this kind of work, it's very easy just to jump onto the next call. You just move, and we don't take time to reflect what worked, what didn't work. You know, there's that definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Many of us bring that mentality to this type of communication where we don't take the time to think about, hey, that was really good when I did that, or boy, I should avoid doing that in the future. So we can begin to hone and improve our skills. And then if the organization does its part, it should capture those best practices and share them with other people. So it's not just you who learn, it's the whole organization who learns.
I feel like you need another metric, which is how well did you understand the customer's problem? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how to measure that.
But I think you can ask. I think you can ask customers and say, do you feel that, in an academic world, we'd say, do you feel that fidelity was high, that accuracy and clarity of information? But you might come up with an F score or something where you're asking a series of, did the person understand? Was the person able to reflect and use the language you were using? I think there's some metrics that we could create.
We're onto something here, Matt.
There we go.
So the scariest thing for, I think, a rep is, wow, I've never heard of this problem. Or this is something new. One of the things I talk about with the future of work and automation, technology can handle, there's a framework I use, I call it simple, complicated, and complex. Technology can handle simple things, a recipe. Technology can handle some complicated things, parking a car, but complex, raising a child, or, those things are still the domain of humans. And so as we have automation, look, at Freshworks, we have products that will do, we have bots that can help guide people through easier answers. So it means only the really complicated or complex issues are going to end up at that customer service desk. So it requires a different mindset. I think, the emotional intelligence, empathy, critical thinking. How do I start to get my reps to think about that? Because that is a scary thing. Somebody calls up, it's like, wait, this isn't on any of my templates. I don't have a canned response for this. What do I do?
So again, I think it comes down to mindset and approach. See it as an opportunity, a challenge, a problem to be solved, rather than something where you are put to the test. This is a crucible for you. You have to pass this test. And I think being honest and candid is appropriate. When you're talking to the person who's called in, this is a new problem for me, but I have experience and I have access to resources, and together we're going to figure it out. People appreciate that kind of honesty, as long as it's followed up on and you move forward with it. So I think part of it is setting expectations. As a human being dealing with complex problems, you're going to come across things that you don't know. And your role is to help find the solutions to those problems. And we're going to create systems and processes and give you resources to help you to do that. That's how management should be treating people in these roles, so that they feel equipped.
I'm going to flip the role here, and I think this is going to be a going off script, Matt.
All right, I'm ready. Bring it. Think fast, talk smart. Here we go.
One of the things I often think about is how, as a customer, how can I ensure that I get better support? And we know that people don't listen very well in general. So what would be some advice for someone calling support? Is there something that you'd say, a way that an approach that they can have, saying, hey, we're trying to hack it here. Is there a way to get better support, knowing what you know about listening?
Yeah. So what I do, and I do this all the time, I spend time on support. One, I recognize, because I've been on the other side, I've been on the phone, and I understand what it's like. So I start with gratitude. Thank you for taking the time to answer my call. And that immediately causes me, what? What? So it's not what they expect. So that violation of expectation can help. Second, what I'll do is I will try to connect on a personal level. I will ask, I'll say, where are you today? So I actually try to connect with the person, so they feel that I'm interested in them, and hopefully they'll be interested in me. So all of a sudden, I'm making this very personal.
You've taken them out of their script too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I will then do is I will do my best to explain my problem in context. So I don't just say, I can't make this work. I'll say, I'm trying to accomplish this task by using this tool or this product or service in this way. Here's what I'm running into. Here are the things that I've done to try to remediate or fix myself. I'm wondering, how can you help me to get through this problem? So you hear that it's a very collaborative, a very open, I'm trying to be emotionally neutral, even if I am frustrated as all heck, to get things started. And I then wait to hear how the person responds. So by connection, by context, and by being collaborative, those 3 C's, if you will help, I believe, the other person respond. And I often find I get very good support, service, and help. And I hope it's because of that approach.
And then if I flip the role back, that at the end of the conversation, if you could say what you just said back to the person who called, hey, this is the context. I understand you're trying to do this, but you weren't able, but I can't do it because of this. And here's where I need to go. That's the answer that the agent should be able to sum up with on the other side. Is that right?
That's right. So I am helping them. I am making it easy for them to paraphrase. I'm trying to give them the benchmarks and landmarks about how I got to where I am, so they can then guide me from there, to go back to our tour book guide example.
It's all about context. Hey, we have a question coming up here, Matt, and it has to do, and the question is an interesting one, because I think it's almost a self-defeating question. What's a good listening to speaking ratio? And maybe if you're thinking about that way, this is how I'm leaning, that maybe you're not really thinking about it the right way, but maybe I'm wrong. Go ahead.
Well, so I think the question brings up a really important point, that we need to listen. A lot of us, especially when we feel uncomfortable or when we're nervous, we talk a lot to fill the space, to help us process what we're thinking. So part of what I'm hearing in the question is a reminder that we should listen. Now, interestingly, academics do study things like this. And what we know is that in a dialogue, in a conversation, when you listen more, when you listen more to somebody, it invites the other person not only to share more, but they will feel more connected to you. You can build trust through listening. So if you allow the person to speak a bit more than you, have more talk time, there's a likelihood that you can increase the connection that you have with that person. Now, there are a whole bunch of confounds in that, because it really depends on what you're talking about, right? If somebody's just screaming at you for more than you're screaming at them, that's not going to help build connection. But it is interesting. And there are actually a whole bunch of tools out on the marketplace that will measure and monitor talk time. So you can see in a given interaction that I've spoken 75% of the time and the other person's only 25. I do think that's informative, that's instructive, not because of the ratio, but because of the reminder that it is a conversation. And if I'm talking 75% of the time, then we're not really having a conversation. You're listening to a lecture, right? So I do think there's some value in thinking about it. The actual number and percentage, I'm not sure is as important.
No, that makes a lot of sense. related, so another question that came up, and this is actually a really good one because we keep talking about listening and paraphrasing. What are some easy tricks for remembering the information you hear? How do you process it?
I have taken several notes as we're talking. So one is to take notes. Two is in paraphrasing, you get repetition, right? And repetition is helpful. There are lots of great tools for remembering things. You can associate things with certain mnemonics. There's a spatial memory where you know, at the beginning of the conversation, I put this in a particular place that I remember in a room I know well, for example. But I think the single best way is just to take notes and to explain that you're doing that. Say, I'm going to take notes as we go through this conversation so I can help. And what we know from research actually is when you explain to somebody that you are taking information down based on what they're saying, people appreciate it. There's research from medical interactions where doctors tell this to patients. Patients appreciate that the doctor is taking time to jot down and record what they're saying. So there's benefit to it.
I feel badly because I didn't take notes in this conversation.
Shame on you. No, you've got a good memory. I'll help you.
So we have one last question, and this is probably maybe the hardest one of it is listening for facts is one thing, but listening for cues of empathy, verbal and nonverbal, particularly nonverbal cues. What advice do you have in terms of that? How could you assess that as part of the conversation?
So if what you're asking is what can I do as a person to demonstrate empathy nonverbally, it's leaning in, it's listening, it's looking at the camera while somebody's talking if you're virtual, so that they see that you're looking at them. If you're on the phone where people don't see you, it's things like, yes, got it, oh, right? And it's those kind of sounds to convey it. And then really paraphrasing, I think, is the best way to demonstrate empathy, because when you repeat back, I heard you. Now, here's one caveat. If somebody is expressing a lot of emotion, try to avoid naming the emotion and simply recognize that somebody is having an emotion. So I might say, clearly you're very passionate about this, rather than saying, I hear you're really frustrated, because you don't want the person saying, I'm not frustrated, I'm angry, right? You don't want to get into somebody's emotional state. But if there's emotion there, acknowledge it without naming it.
All right, the 30 minutes goes so quickly. We've learned about perhaps a new metric.
Yes.
For
our
measuring
fidelity
success,
score. Yes.
A fidelity score. I'm pretty excited about that. I think we're going to have to explore that. Listening, being able to paraphrase. We looked at the other side of it. If you're a customer trying to get good support, how could you maybe start the conversation and give yourself a step above? One of the things, part of what we do at Freshworks, we talk about easily delighting your customers, delight made easy. Do you have a story about something, an experience you had recently where you had a delightful, or something delighted you in that experience?
Yes, I do. And I don't think it's just because my expectations were so low. So I have two teenagers, and when you were talking about AI helping raising kids, I was thinking, oh, please, no. But one of my older son has been saving money for a long time, and he finally had enough money to buy a car, a used car. So we went to buy a used car. A situation, not one where you would expect great service and great collaboration, et cetera. But we actually had an amazing experience. We worked with this one individual, and the individual actually went above and beyond in what she did for us. And as a result, this is what really put the cherry on top for this interaction. After we left, she was looking through pictures of the car as she was putting them into whatever files she puts the pictures in. And she noticed that we were missing a front license plate holder. We didn't notice it. We were just excited to get out of there. He was excited to have this car he'd been saving for. She called us up a couple hours later, said, notice this was missing. I'm going to arrange to have a technician come to your house and install it for you. When is a convenient time? Blew me away. She didn't have to do that. I didn't even know we had a problem. I would have figured it out when the two license plates came and I didn't have a place to put one. But the point is that really delighted me. And it was not a lot of effort on her part, but it really made a difference for me.
Is there something that you saw when you started the interaction that gave you a sense that she was practicing some of the things that you've just talked about? That, because it sounds like she was doing that. It wasn't just, here's another transaction. It was a little more than that, right?
Well, she was interested in fostering a relationship, and what really impressed me is, I was there with my teenage son who was doing this, and she didn't talk to me. She talked to him, and she realized that this was important for him. She figured out that this was his purchase and his work, and she knew I needed to be there because he couldn't sign for some of these things. But the fact of the matter was that she really took time to establish a relationship, and that impressed me. And I saw that from the get-go, and that was cool.
That's great advice for any service provider. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you just tell people how they can keep up with all things Matt Abrahams?
Excellent. Thank you for that. Let me rattle a few things off. I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to have you link in with me, Matt Abrahams. I curate a website on communication skills, nofreakingspeaking.com. And then I host a podcast called Think Fast, Talk Smart for Stanford Graduate School of Business, all about communication skills. In fact, we are releasing an episode tomorrow on how to learn from your mistakes and to communicate the mistakes you make.
Important skill.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for joining us today. The next Masters of Moment will be on March 17th. I hope you can join us then. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to continuing the conversation on the next episode of Masters of Moment, brought to you by Freshworks. Thanks.